the overview effect as it applies to astronauts is not only seeing the Earth from space, but in space.
Welcome to the Holo Movement Awaken Your Purpose podcast, where we interview incredible people that are living and breathing their purpose. And you can too. If you would like to support this programming, drop us a like or leave us a review. Now let's dive in.
It's just the truth. We're on a spaceship. We're not on a stable platform. We're on a spaceship. And it's roaring through the universe. And we all are actually astronauts in that sense.
We are floating through outer space as we speak.
And I think, it's important that the overview effect as it applies to astronauts is not only seeing the Earth from space, but in space. So you see the Earth, no borders, no boundaries, a very thin atmosphere. And then behind it is this blackness. And you realize, there's nowhere else that we can go and survive but this little tiny blue and white ball. That's it. That's all we have. So
it's beautiful.
Mike Foreman said, if you're not a conservationist when you go, you will be when you return.
Yes, so
it's
true.
Just inevitable.
So true.
Welcome to the Holo Movement Awaken Your Purpose podcast, where we interview incredible people that are living and breathing their purpose. And you can too. If you would like to support this programming, drop us a like or leave us a review. Now let's dive in.
We're going to cut that off. So just put your hand on your heart and take a deep breath here. And we're going to drop our shoulders for a second. Take a deep breath. And we're going to connect with our higher selves. And all the people out there that are still searching for their purpose and calm. And when you're ready, you can just open your eyes and go ahead.
Hi, Frank.
Hi, Yasmine.
So my name is Yasmine El Baggari, and my purpose is to bring humanity together and break down barriers in this world that feels quite disconnected. I'm so excited and thrilled to be interviewing one of my favorite humans on the planet, Frank White. Frank White, you are a hero. You are a legend. You coined the term, the overview effect, and you've had quite a journey. Tell us a little bit about you first before we dive into some key explorations today.
Yeah, well, I was born in Mississippi, in the Deep South. And I would have grown up in Mississippi, but just to show you how interconnected our world is, North Korea decided to invade South Korea, and my father was called back into the army, and we became nomads for many years. And I lived in Virginia, Kentucky, Germany, Arkansas, back to Mississippi. And I went to Harvard for college from my little high school in Mississippi, which was a big culture shock. And then from there to Oxford for graduate work. Since finishing at Oxford, I've been searching for my purpose. I really have. And you said say a little bit, so I'm just going to summarize by saying that I left Oxford around 1969, and I published my book, The Overview Effect, in 1987. And for the last 40 years, my purpose has been to share the overview effect worldwide, or as we say, bring the overview effect down to Earth.
I love that. I remember a story. I think we were having coffee somewhere in America, and you told me that you were on a plane. It was maybe one of your first flights going across country, and you looked down on like you looked down from the plane,
Yeah,
and you had a moment.
yeah,
Tell me about that. What was that moment that where it kind of became clear that this was going to be your purpose?
yeah. Well, so the predecessor to that story is that I'd become engaged in the Space Studies Institute with Gerard K. O'Neill, and the vision there was to think about large scale space migration. That wasn't the term, it's my term today, but Jerry O'Neill was not focused on missions. He was focused on how could humanity leave the Earth, live well in the solar system, and help restore the Earth by moving civilization off and outward. I was entranced by this idea. I was flying cross country to do a consulting project. I was looking out at the Earth, and I had an epiphany. And it's just, if I lived in an O'Neill community permanently off of Earth, I would see the Earth as an overview. I would have an overview. I would see it as a whole system. And then I would experience the overview effect. And that was around 1984. And I'm glad you asked the question, because there's a narrative out there that I just interviewed a bunch of astronauts and I thought, well, I got to have a name for this thing. So I called it the overview effect. That's too simplistic. I realized I had a theory and no data. And that's how I started interviewing astronauts, because they didn't live permanently off of the Earth, but they were closer than you are or I am for now. But
Yes.
no, they were the closest proxies we had. So that's how I started interviewing astronauts.
I love that. And I remember you telling me a story about how you reached out to NASA to just cold email to ask them if you could interview some of their NASA astronauts. And you got to interview people while they were at the International Space Station. What was that story?
Well,
Tell us more. And
actually, it was the Lord moves in mysterious ways. So, see, as an undergraduate, I had done social science, and my whole idea of how to do that was you need a really large sample size to have any meaningful data. So I told NASA, I called the public affairs office. I said, I need to interview the entire astronaut corps right away. And the guy at the other end thought that was hilarious. But he was very kind. He said, look, Frank, you come to Houston. I'll set you up with interviews with 2 astronauts. That was disappointing. I thought, that's not a sample size. That's 2 people. And then he said, why don't you interview retired astronauts? We don't control them. And I mean, I was surprised. I'd never thought of that. I thought they probably did control them for the rest of their lives.
they just had more time.
Yeah. And so he disappointed me, and then he gave me the key to everything, the
Wow.
keys to the kingdom, really, because then I started interviewing retired astronauts, and for the most part, they're much more open.
Yes.
This has changed. I mean, the Artemis 2 astronauts are incredibly open, and they're active duty astronauts. Yeah. But back in the day, astronauts were much more mission driven, and the retired astronauts could speak more freely. So that's what started the whole thing. And the overview effect used to be about space people who've not yet come into existence, but now it really is about the astronaut experience.
I love that. So you're now kind of at Harvard, head in communications like department. If I'm remembering correctly, like how did the people closest to you react when you begun to kind of change direction and pursuing this dream? Like how did your relationships change when you begun to align your life with your purpose? Because this has been consistent for
So,
you for
well,
decades.
yeah. Well, so what happened? I really thought after I'd gotten the book published in 1987, I really thought the revolution would happen really quickly. And I meant a revolution. I meant a change in thought worldwide. I mean, to me, it was a revelation. And you have to understand, Yasmin, when I started interviewing the astronauts, I had to hold out the possibility they would say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard, no, I don't get it. That's a scientific approach, right? But I got confirmation, and they were saying, there are no borders or boundaries on the earth. It's a whole system. We don't understand, and it's hard for people living on the surface to get it. And so I thought, this is a revelation. People will completely change their behavior, and I will have a bestseller. And people do have bestsellers, and then they go on to make a living as a writer. That didn't happen. I didn't have a plan B. So I thought I knew my purpose, but then
Mm.
the plan didn't work. So I wrecked my finances. And fortunately, Mother Harvard came to my rescue. I got a job, started working there in communications, as you said, and I started around 1990 something. And that was interesting because that was a terrific job, a great job. It used all my skills. I was working for a university I admire and value, talking to really brilliant people all the time. And there was this one gnawing feeling, what about space? What about the overview effect?
I love that. I love that. It's very clear that you were meant to bring this to the world. And,
Yeah,
decades later, now everybody's talking about the overview effect.
I know.
And you're coined everywhere. Like you're featured in all of these amazing pieces, articles, documentaries. And it's amazing to witness how something that you thought about in the 80s
Yeah,
or maybe the 60s even probably when the moon landing happened because you probably were alive back then.
it was. I will say a brief thing to help people think about their purpose. I was in England. I was at Oxford in the 60s when Apollo happened, and it stirred something up in me. I was very active I was a social activist, but I was very down because it had been 1968 was a terrible year for America. We had two assassinations, riots in the cities. Um, the war in Vietnam was a quagmire. And then Apollo 8 happened, and we had Earthrise, and it was so inspiring. It kind of turned me around, but I had no concept for it. I just knew this is important, you know? And for people in the process of searching for their purpose, I have some advice. Pay attention. Maybe you can't figure it out, but I mean, this is 1968. It was 20 years later that the book was published, but I knew there was something going on when I watched Apollo, you know, and now I know it was the overview.
Now,
Now
yes,
I know what it was, but the that experience on the plane gave me a context and words, and then the astronauts really backed it up. That yeah, people change when they have this perspective.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Like just realizing how small we are on this planet and I was looking at the news this morning. I'm from Morocco, as you know, and 60,000 people
Yeah,
crossed to Spain, in Morocco, in the
yeah.
country. And I was just thinking about you. I'm like, if Frank
I
could
was
say
thinking
anything,
about you.
like, yes,
I was thinking
you
about you.
know, this notion of borders and the fact that we need visas to cross to
Enough.
another nation, it's kind of silly from outer space.
Well, it's a fascinating topic because I make the distinction, and I think it came out with Artemis too, between overview thinking and surface thinking. Surface thinking is very focused on borders. It's very focused on boundaries. It's very focused on how different you are
Protection.
from me. Yeah, it's all about those distinctions which disappear from orbit or even on a suborbital hop. And it doesn't mean we don't keep borders, really. I've said this many times, and it's so obvious. I live in Massachusetts. Do I want all of the United States to look like Massachusetts? No. I think it's terrific that California is different, but I don't need a visa to go to California.
Right.
Um, borders, borders and boundaries don't have to be barriers, I think.
Yes. And especially like, Europe is similar. We could go through Europe without
Yeah,
a visa. But
right.
it's oftentimes the borders are more intensified when it comes to the East versus the West.
Hmm.
Different, economic
Yeah,
society, different countries with different socioeconomic classes. And as a Moroccan, I've been to 52 countries and I needed a visa for each of them. And
yeah.
every time you apply, you have to prove yourself that you are,
You're worthy.
economically and financially thousands of dollars for
Yeah,
each application. So you think of it, my whole life has been paperwork. So I look forward to becoming a US citizen this year. I'm
really.
finally eligible after 16 years. But to go back to you, Frank, what would you say? Who was a catalyst for you, like a human, a relationship that really sparked this next evolution for you? Like when you were thinking about this idea, bringing in the overview effect to the world, who supported you? Who believed in you?
Well, a lot of people did actually. I could name a number of people, but I would start with Gerard K. O'Neill himself. Jerry, I've said to people, no O'Neill, no overview, because it was his idea that I was thinking about while flying cross country. And also, he wrote the foreword to the first edition, and he did a great job. And he was always very supportive of me and what I was doing. And so he was very important. And then there were quite a few other people, like George Field, who was a professor at Harvard. And even before I started talking about the overview effect, I met him and I started talking about the fact that we're creating these new civilizations off world. And he was on the president's National Commission on Space. And he kind of brought me on as a colleague, and I actually got to write some of the material for the report of that commission because of George. And uh, then all the astronauts were anxious and eager to share. I think this is something really to emphasize, Yasmine. This is the astronaut story. I'm talking about an experience I haven't had except maybe
Yes.
mildly. But without the astronauts, and in particular, I would mention Edgar Mitchell, who's been very supportive before he died. The astronauts want the story out. They want people to know our perspective is not true. Ron Guerin says we're living a lie.
Right.
on this planet. Because it's not really anybody's fault in a way, in the sense that if you'd never left a particular room in your house and you'd never gone outside, that would be your world. And I think there are some people like that who they're homebound for whatever reason, and that's their whole world. So how can they know what the world is like, right? Um, and the astronauts have this unique privilege, and I mean commercial astronauts now, to see what I call it the truth. I mean, it's just the truth. We're on a spaceship. We're not on a stable platform. We're on a spaceship, and it's roaring through the universe. And we all are actually astronauts in that
We
sense.
are floating through through outer space as we speak.
And
That
and
is
I
true.
think, it's important that the overview effect as it applies to astronauts is not only seeing the Earth from space, but in space. So you see the Earth, no borders, no boundaries, a very thin atmosphere. And then behind it is this blackness. And you realize, oh, there's nowhere else that we can go and survive but this little tiny blue and white ball. That's it. That's all we have. So,
That's beautiful.
Mike Foreman said, if you're not a conservationist when you go, you will be when you return.
Yes. So
It's just
true. So
inevitable.
true. I love it. It's you know, I hear often people, kind of question this idea of space. Like, why go to space when there are so many challenges in the world, right? And of course, this is the question to be asking. I'm curious about your perspective. How would you respond to such question? Because it is true. There are conflicts, there's war, lots of inequality. And people ask, why spend billions of dollars, trillions of dollars going to space when we have urgent challenges that we need to face on planet Earth?
Well, that's a multi-level question, and it's a good question. And I urge all people who are advocating space exploration to answer it seriously and don't dismiss it because, as you know, I'm raising money for a space flight for myself. I have to think about it. What if I am able to raise thousands of dollars to have this experience, the overview effect? What if I spent that money helping the people of Gaza? I could help people, right? I could help people in Gaza. I could help people in Ukraine. So you really do have to ask yourself, what am I going to do with the experience? Um, and I do. I ask myself every day. And I think you have to live up to it. And I think that's why the astronauts want to share their story, you know. So that's one answer is that um, you do have a choice. You do have a choice. You could spend it in another way. By analogy, um, when I was at Harvard, we worked in fundraising, and people said, why should I give to Harvard? You've got all the money in the world. I'm going to give my money to the homeless shelter. And our answer was, yes, do that. But we would like to have some of your treasure because we have professors and students looking for a solution to homelessness. So, yes, help the people in need, but let's find a solution. Another answer is I think it might have been Socrates or Einstein or somebody smarter than me. It might have been Claude. I don't know. But they said you can't solve a problem at the level at which it's been generated. So if you leave the planet and just get that new perspective, you see the problems differently. You understand the interconnectedness of everything. You understand that every problem is interconnected. We can't just solve one problem after the other. It's systemic. Anusha Ansari said after she flew, the problems didn't look as big to me when I came back. And of course, you know Anusha, she's working on the X Prize. She's really working hard to improve life on Earth. So that's another level. But I could give many more answers, but I think the answer is each person has to find that within themselves, each government, each company. And one thing that really encourages me is that I see even the private companies that are doing space tourism, a lot of them are marketing the overview effect. And
Right.
they're making it clear that they not only want you to go have this experience, but when you come back, they want to support you to make use of it. So,
I love that. I
you know,
know, I know Space for Humanity is a
of
good
course,
example to Space for Earth, but also empowering and enabling people from developing nations to go to space. We had the first Mexican woman, first
yeah,
Egyptian woman, um,
yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
inspiring.
And I'm not going to get into it, but we haven't even talked about things that can be done in zero gravity that you can't do on Earth, drugs that you can build and create that can help people. And there are just so many really practical things. I've been talking more philosophically, but there are a lot of practical things you can do that you can't do on Earth.
Yeah. And I think it was Buckminster Fuller who said, I think the quote goes, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete."
I think that was Bucky, another one of my heroes. Yeah,
Yes,
he was a great man. He was.
I know. There's so many amazing people, and you are one of them, Frank. I know you've inspired tens of thousands, if not millions of people in this world. And one of them, our dear friend, mutual friend, Loretta Whitesides, who's also an advocate for space with her incredible initiative, Space Kind, which is about training future astronauts, like how to be a better human, a
Right.
better steward of the Earth before you go to space. So when you come back, you get to work. That's the whole point. Having that perspective, expanding your horizon, coming back as an Earth ambassador.
Hmm.
And you've done it. You've gone to the training.
I've done Space Kind. Um, I don't know if you can tell, but my dog, Moondog, is really trying to get my attention here.
I hear him, Moondog.
Uh, can you wait just a little while? Yeah, yeah, okay. She just went to the groomer, so she's traumatized, as you know.
Oh,
Um, but I've told this story before. When you talk about people who've made a difference, Loretta is one. And I'm going to tell this story because most of the people in my um, community have heard it many times. They're tired of it, but not everybody's heard it. So,
there's 9 billion humans on the planet.
yeah, there's a lot of people out there. So, so I went to work for Harvard, as I told you, and there was this gnawing feeling that I wasn't really fulfilling my purpose, right? So, so one day I got a call um, from somebody named Loretta, and she said, "I want to come to your office. I've driven all the way from Texas to see you." I said, "Okay," um, and it was Loretta, and she came in and she basically said something like, The Overview Effect is the most important book ever written. And it was kind of like it is. I mean, this was maybe 1997, and I just felt like the revolution wasn't going to happen. And she was very enamored of the Overview Effect, and it didn't just make my day; it made like a decade of realizing there were people out there who were getting the message really. Um, and I could still fulfill my purpose, that maybe there was still a chance. And I think that was the hardest part of the 20 years from 1987 to 2007, was that sense, well, I do have a purpose. And I wrote it all down in the book, and yet it's not working. Um, and yet it was, because, Yasmin, these were primitive times. No internet, no social media. It's hard to really remember. It's not so long ago. No cell phones. The way information moved around the earth was really different back then. So the book was working, but there was no way to know it was working except people like Loretta coming and telling you so.
There was no social media or AI to like know what people were
Nothing. I
saying.
mean, there was cable television. I was very involved in bringing cable TV online to get more information out there, because 3 television channels was not enough. But then the satellites were going up, talking about benefits. Satellites were going up. We were getting global news finally. And um, so it was beginning to look like something could happen. But, the Overview Effect as an idea took off around 2012. And that was largely because of the internet, because Planetary Collective came to me, a group of young men from England, and they wanted to make a short film about the Overview Effect. And so I said, sure. And I put them in touch with Nicole Stott and Ron Guerin and Jeff Hoffman, other astronauts. And we premiered their film, which wasn't short, it was 19 minutes. We premiered it at Harvard, and without any real marketing or any real promotion, they just put it on the web and it just exploded. And, I think it's been seen by like 9 million people now on Vimeo. So I guess I keep wanting to think about other people looking for their purpose. The time has to be right. Everything has to be right. You may feel like you're not doing it right, but maybe the tools aren't there yet.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, also challenge. I mean, I'm curious for you, like what was your biggest challenge to living your purpose? Because there are years and decades of kind of not waiting, but it's not happening. Like the the revolution is not happening. Like what am I
Yeah.
gonna do? And there are doubts and highs and lows. And what was your biggest challenge for you?
I think my biggest challenge was continuing to have faith
Hmm.
that this was real. It wasn't a dream. It's very hard. I mean, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but when you have a vision or a dream, or you think you have a purpose that transcends your own well being, it's very hard when you're not getting feedback from anybody saying, yes, absolutely. Attaboy, atta girl, keep it up. So I think the biggest challenge was the feeling of just maybe I'm deluding myself. Maybe I'm wasting my time. And as you know, I got married. to the love of my life and became part of her huge, wonderful family. And of course, I had my own children. And I mean, there was a lot of thinking of, well, what else do you really need? I mean, and that was a very reasonable question. What else do you want out of life? This is a great life. You work at a great institution, you have a wonderful wife, you have great kids, you have great relatives. I mean, there's always that critical voice saying, come on, come on, just live, just enjoy. I mean, it's always, I think everybody has that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you never shied away from it, and now there's a real opportunity for
Yeah.
you to be going to space, and a crew of our friends, space community, came together, like stewarded by Pablo from Moondao, who
Yeah.
said, "Let's make this happen. Let's send Frank White to space." There's a hashtag, "Send Frank to space." So, tell us more about that. What's the latest? We're
Sure.
all so excited and on the edge of our seat to witness you, fly off into outer space. Tell us more.
Well, so first of all, thank you because you've been a great support in so many ways. Um, I mean, it's
It's an
people like
honor.
you. It's people like you, Yasmine, that keep me uh, believing. You know,
Thank you.
um, you asked me about people who've been supportive. I don't want to forget Dylan Taylor, who has been there for a long time, both for me and the Human Space Program, the nonprofit I co-founded. But I think that since I was maybe 10 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut. I think that's been part of my purpose all along. And you've heard this story. I really had a lot of chances to do it, but I felt that my strength was in the humanities, the social sciences. And until 2021, realistically, unless you were quite wealthy and you could buy a ticket to the ISS through the Russians for $20 million, um, you really needed to be a scientist. You need to be an engineer. You need to be a medical doctor or something. I did not have the credentials to be an astronaut, but that's what I wanted. And in 2021, commercial spaceflight started. So, uh, shout out to Nicole Stott. Um, all along here, Nicole's been saying the first person Blue Origin should have flown was Frank White. And
So true.
Nicole has been putting it out there, uh, I should get to go. So um, I had heard about Moondao. Um, Jared Angaza from the Human Space Program had talked to them, and I met Pablo at a Blue Origin event that I was Ron Rossano's guest at that event. And I actually had set up a meeting with them to talk about the human space program in Moondao. That was the idea. And this is another kind of lesson, follow your intuition. It popped into my head to say, because they had flown two people, right? And I said, if you're looking for somebody else to fly, I'm your guy. And they said, we've been thinking about that. Yeah, we'd like to do that.
That's amazing.
I think,
And Pablo is my neighbor. He lives
I know
one
you
block
live
from my
about
house.
10 minutes away. Yeah,
That's also an wild synchronicity, like
it is.
that. I'm thinking about how we send Frank White to space. Loretta's thinking about it. Nicole Stott is thinking about it. And
Yeah,
then Pablo down the street, he said, I have the tools to make it happen.
yeah, I know.
Let's do a campaign.
Yeah. And so Pablo and Ryan and the Moondau community. So I was astonished that they said that, but I was really thrilled. And so that was quite a while ago. I mean, we've been at this well over a year and a half, maybe 2 years almost. And so we started the campaign. And to make a really long story short, um, we had the campaign from March 12th to April 27th, very short campaign. We raised about $175,000, which is really short of what you need, say, for a rocket flight. But again, persistence is important. And I got to give a shout out to Moondau on this because they could easily have said, Frank, we gave it a good shot. It just isn't there. And so good luck. But they kept going and going and going. And so we said, we're going to take a month and talk to all the different carriers. And so we're going to say, this is what we got. What have you got? You know, like that. So to summarize, we've had really good conversations with a couple of stratospheric balloon companies. Zafalto is in France and Halo is in Spain.
And that's just for people who don't know about these. It's 100,000 feet view from
Yeah,
which you still experience the overview effect, but
yeah,
it's a much longer ride than
yeah,
just a 11-minute
yeah.
back and forth.
It's important to understand this. You don't really go to space because you don't really reach the definition of outer space, which is at minimum 50 miles, and you're probably going to go 20 to 30 miles. You're not weightless. But as you said, it's a long kind of leisurely journey up. You do see the Earth very much more than you can see on the surface. And you don't really become an astronaut, you become an aeronaut. And there's actually a rich tradition of aeronauts and hot air balloons. And we still have a lot of people who do hot air balloons. So it's different. And it kind of fits into part of my goal, which is to compare different ways to produce the overview effect, you know?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful perspective as well, right?
Yeah,
Like from the plane to the
sure.
balloon to a rocket to a donkey.
Yeah.
Actually, paragliding. I just recently went paragliding and I
Yeah.
experienced the G forces, which was amazing. And then I got to kind of witness a beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains yeah, it was unbelievable.
Well,
Gives you a perspective.
so it's kind of all on a spectrum of consciousness changing. What we're really trying to get at is the change in consciousness that happens. It goes back to why do we spend our efforts leaving the planet when the planet needs our help? Well, if any of these experiences can produce that shift so that a person puts more of their energy into helping the earth,
Right.
it's worthwhile. And so we are also talking to Virgin Galactic, which is the only rocket game in town, really. Um, and I think I can't say anything about it really because you know about the NDAs. Everybody has
Yes, I do.
non-disclosures, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
So okay, we've got two more questions to explore. We've got 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Um, what So as you know, and you've been part of the wave, part of the Hollow Movement wave last year in Asheville.
Oh yeah.
What do you think and the Hollow Movement, part of the mission is to bring purpose help people find their purpose and connect the dots, interconnectedness across the universe, across the globe. Last year, we explored the overview effect with you and
Yeah.
Chris Simbrowski and the Chris's. And then this year, we explored the underview effect, which was more like the ocean, the oceans, and kind of like that lens.
Sure.
So, what do you think is the effect of living your purpose? Like, what if, like, what is the impact? You know, do you think living your purpose can have on others around you? So, when someone, you know, is courageous and bold and just goes for it, what do you think is the effect that it produces around you?
Well, my theory, and I think you have it too, and I think the whole movement has it too. I think everybody has a purpose. It's there, and as you know, my son is a Zen master, so I'm very aware of Buddhism. And the Buddha did not say you get enlightened. The Buddha talked about how you needed to clean away all the junk that convinced you that you weren't enlightened. You are enlightened, right? So you do have a purpose. To answer your question, I believe that a person living their purpose encourages others to make the effort to find their own purpose. And again, it's not so much a question of striving as knowing, experiencing, and letting it happen. And so, really, it changes your life, not in that it makes it all great or wonderful or easy. It may get harder.
It
It may
gives you
get
that
more
fire.
difficult. Huh?
Yes. Yeah, it gives you that fire that
Yeah.
inside.
But you
I
have
love that.
you have a certain equanimity. It's like, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do here on Earth. And
Yeah.
that's really what Loretta talks about in Space Kind. Find out what you're supposed to be doing here on Earth
And go do it.
and just do it. And yeah,
So, what would the world be like if, let's imagine that 9 billion of us were living their purpose? What would the world look like?
I think it would be a utopia, or as close to a utopia as human beings can get. Um, it seems to me that, first of all, you might make the argument, and I never thought of this before. I think you could make the argument that a lot of the strife, a lot of the violence, a lot of the unhappiness on Earth comes from people who are frustrated. They don't know their purpose. They're not living their purpose. They're unhappy. They're angry. They don't know why. And that can include world leaders. Just because somebody is high up in the hierarchy doesn't mean they're happy or satisfied. Maybe far from it. And so they can wreak havoc. Um, so I think it would be as close to utopia, and that's why I said as close to utopia, because I doubt that it would be perfect. However, again, I think people would see the connectedness, and we would understand, as the astronauts say, we're all in this together. It's one of the phrases I've started using that people seem to find meaningful is, we are all crew members of Spaceship Earth. And if you talk to somebody who says, "Ah, no, I'm a passenger," they're not telling the truth. They're actually a crew member who's not doing their job. And
I love that.
yeah, it's just something. The idea that we're all crew members on Spaceship Earth is not mine, but this feeling, and the idea that there are no passengers, but realizing that there are people who think they are. And it's important for them to understand, no, you're not. You're a crew member who needs to get to work. And
Yes.
so I think everybody would know I've got to be a crew member.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of like people just simply living their full potential,
Yeah.
or being in their full potential. And one of the things I love about being a steward within the Hollow movement is that the Hollow movement itself is a movement where we all contribute. There is no one leader. We're all co-creating this vision to interconnect as many humans and organizations as possible. And so I love that. It's Frank, I could talk to you for hours, which we usually do when we find each other in different states and countries. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
precious time. And we'll be sharing about your book, the overview effect, and as well as the campaign, if people feel inspired to join the hashtag San Frank White to Space. We can't wait.
Thank you, Yasmine. Thank you for
Thank you,
living your
Frank.
purpose. Thank you for supporting me to do mine. And we didn't talk enough about it, but the Holo movement is terrific too. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.
Bye bye.
Au revoir.
Thank you for joining us today. It is our goal to give you the courage to begin to identify your passion and live your purpose for the sake of yourself and for the sake of us all. Over the course of this multi-year collaboration and research project, we have identified patterns and a 7-stage process that many people go through on their way to living their purpose. If you'd like to browse our archive or figure out what stage you're in, head over to holomovement.net/purpose. If you would like to browse our living library of resources, or if you found your purpose and want to contribute what worked for you, head over to lightnet.org/purpose. And as Mark Twain used to say, the most important day of your life is the day you're born and the day you figure out why. You're not alone. We will look forward to helping you on this incredible journey. This has been a collaboration between Holo Movement, LightNet, and incredible people like yourself. Special thanks to Good of the Whole. We'll see you next time.